Hello and welcome to The Informed Animal Ally, presented by the Vancouver Humane Society. This is the Animal Ethics Podcast, where we share the ins and outs of topics like cruelty, legislation, and advocacy here in BC and across Canada. Hi, I'm Chantelle Archambault, Communications Director for the Vancouver Humane Society. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, VHS's Executive Director, Amy Morris.
Hello.
And today, to talk about lessons from grassroots animal advocacy, we're also welcoming two advocates doing incredible work in Canada. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Barbara Lapointe. Barbara has volunteered her time to several animal welfare projects in Canada and the United States since 1998. She's responsible for a national campaign asking Canada's largest classified site to ban the commercial sale of animals. This campaign has gained national media attention and the support of 464,000 individuals, 8 major corporations, and 31 animal welfare organizations. Thank you so much for joining us, Barbara.
Thank you very much for having me, Chantelle.
And secondly, I'm also excited to welcome Tessa Vanderkop from the Vancouver Humane Society's Board of Directors. Tessa is a social purpose strategist with the United Way Social Purpose Institute, where she's helping business to become an engine for good in society. She's also a passionate conservationist and led the Ivory Free Canada campaign with elephant addicts, which received support from more than 700,000 Canadians. Thank you so much for being here, Tessa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So to start us off, I'd love to hear more about how you both became interested in animal advocacy. Barbara, do you want to start and then Tessa to follow?
Yes, I can. I lived in the US for 7 years. And when I came back to Quebec, in a small town located on the island of Montreal, I was floored to see that puppies and kittens were still being sold at the pet store at my local shopping center. So I wanted to change things. So that's where it kind of started for that moment for me. I wanted to change things.
Tessa, would you like to share as well?
Yeah. I think I was born an animal lover. I mean, even as a kid, I had all my little stuffed animals and I would build veterinarians for them and get my mom's like tea cozies and cover them up and say goodnight every night to them. So I think it was just the way I was born. And then I was at work in Toronto and I was at a convention and at the Toronto Convention Center. And one of the publishers at that time had decided to rent an elephant for a campaign, and this elephant was in this convention center. And actually, when I still think about it, I get quite emotional. But anyways, I just remember looking at it and thinking, what the heck is going on here? It was just such a disconnect for me. And then anyways, it took me probably a few years to do something with that initial thing. And then I found out that a circus was coming to Canada. And I remember at that time thinking, well, I know how to write. I know how to do publicity. So I'm just going to create as much trouble for this circus as I possibly can. And that's what I did. I chased the circus across Canada and I would send press releases and information to town councils and the mayor and council. I'd alert local TV and media, and I try and reach out to local advocacy groups just to connect. And that was sort of the beginning of connecting a passion with skills that I thought I had.
That's so lovely.
That's fantastic.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Tessa. What a great start to advocacy, but challenging things to have to deal with. We heard both of your backgrounds at the beginning of the episode, but I'd like to ask each of you to speak a little bit more about the campaigns you've worked on, provide more details, maybe some challenges and successes. So, Barbara, can you get us started with that?
Yes. So when my local shopping center was still selling cats and dogs, puppies at the pet store, I started to attend every town council meetings in 2012, every month, to encourage my city to adopt the bylaw asking dogs and cats and rabbits sold in pet store to be sterilized and to be sourced from animal shelters. So I started in 2012 and the bylaw was finally adopted in 2015. So I had started to learn to be patient at that time. And it's during those town council meetings that several town councillors kept coming back with the argument that we could not adopt such a bylaw for pet stores or combat pet overpopulation, as breeders will still continue to sell animal all online on classified sites. So in the summer of 2013, when the town council was on a summer break, I decided to research the topic and the problems associated with the sale of animals on Kijiji. Kijiji because it was Canada's most popular classified and still is classified sites. And I launched the campaign. So it's been over 10 years now with Kijiji. The problem that I found on that site was that those classified sites were unable to distinguish responsible breeders with breeders who, without regards to animal welfare and the buyer, profit from the sale of animals. So over the past 10 years, I've collected numerous media stories of 6 puppies and kittens sold on Kijiji. I gathered testimonials from disappointed Kijiji users, the comments from veterinarians, animal shelters, and to demonstrate that, yes, there are too many buyers that continue to be cheated by unscrupulous and unethical breeders on classified sites like Kijiji, while too many animals suffering from the health problems, usually often due to rearing and breeding conditions, are sold on this site. And then it causes veterinary costs to new owners, guardians, and inflict them with unnecessary emotional and financial stress on them. So that's what me and my 465,000 individuals were signing this petition. We want the leader of Canada's classified site, Kijiji, to set an example and sending the message that animals should not be sold as just another item via classified ads. Puppy mills and unethical breeders may continue to exist even if Kijiji Canada stops the sale of animals, but at least they would not give them an easy platform to thrive on. So that's the goal of this campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such an important message, especially now that we're seeing so much overpopulation and overcrowding in the shelter rescue system. There's so many animals out there who need homes. We're already living.
Tessa, can you share more about the background of the campaign that you've been working on?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to say, Barbara, like honestly, it just takes people like you that just go for it, right? Thank the world that you exist because that's how we make the world a better place. So after that whole chasing the circus around for a couple of years, I woke up one morning and I'd heard about a group called the Global March for Elephants and Rhinos, and they were based out of the United States, and they organized kind of a global awareness about the threats facing wildlife in Africa. And so elephants and lions and rhinos and so forth. And so it was a call to action to organize an event. And so I literally woke up and was like, I'm going to organize an event. And my husband was like, you're doing what? And then I just Googled elephant advocacy Vancouver, and I found Fran Duffy, who is the founder of Elephant Addicts. And we just joined forces and we organized, along with Leanne Fogarty, a number of those annual marches. And then it was only after the last one where I think we were like, okay, so this is great. We have people coming out to these, but what are we really doing? And so that's when we switched tactics and we really looked at how Canada was enabling the sale of ivory and what that was doing and rhino horn. And so we pulled that whole piece apart and really pivoted our advocacy towards getting the government to change the actual regulations around importing elephant ivory and rhino horn. So we started with a letter to then Minister Catherine McKenna, and it was actually Mary Lee Davies, who I knew through this other world, who said, well, maybe you could get a couple of signatures from other like-minded organizations. So she gave me some names of some people. We added those names to the letter, but then my colleagues Fran and Leanne just kind of went crazy. It's like, well, if we can get 3 signatures, why can't we get more? We got 100 signatures for that letter globally.
Wow.
So for every letter we wrote, we had this activated network that was willing to support what we were looking for. And later on, that ended up being quite helpful. And then we thought, okay, well, this is great. Fran had started our Facebook page. She went out and learned everything about social media. We have 20,000 followers on the Elephant Addicts Facebook page. And then Leanne said, well, why don't we do a petition? And we're like, yeah, okay, let's do the petition. We'll probably get like 100 signatures, like 1,000 signatures. And that's when we really, I think, started understanding that Canadians did not want and did not know that we still allowed the legal trade of ivory. So we ended up getting like 1,000 signatures easily, 10,000, and then 20,000. We were like, holy smokes, what is going on? And that's when it just kept growing. And then that change.org petition really, I think, it's at over 700,000 now. I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about collaborations, but that was what really kind of signaled that we were hitting something. And so that's not the end of the campaign. We ended up collaborating with other organizations, but that was definitely like, we knew we were zeroing in on something.
Wow, that is so impressive. I think it's so inspiring that it just takes that first spark of identifying that there's something wrong and just look how much you can accomplish. Thank you so much for your advocacy work. I would love to hear more about the successes that you've both seen from that work. Barbara, would you like to begin?
Yes, with the pet store bylaw, like I said, after 3 years of campaigning, like going to monthly council meetings and writing open letters in the newspapers, asking residents to send in emails to councillors, my city finally adopted the bylaw, asking the dogs, cats, and rabbits sold in pet stores must be sterilized and be sourced from animal shelters. We were one of the first cities actually in Quebec to have such bylaw. So that was a great success. Another campaign I kind of worked on is after adopting 3 stray cats that were roaming in my backyard, I went again to town council meetings. After that, asking them this time to implement a trap, neuter, return, maintain program, a TNRM for community cats. Again, with the help of residents, same thing, same council meetings, open letters in newspapers, asking residents to send letters. The program was implemented in 2019 in my small town and is still running today. It's fun to see like neighbors who still ask me about the program and want to get their permits and stuff like that, so which is good. As far as Kijiji today is still selling animals on its site, but I would say that my petition has gathered over 465,000 signatures so far. I see it as a success because it's 465,000 individuals who are aware of the issues surrounding animals sold on classified sites. That's 465,000 individuals who are discussing this matter with a family member, a friend, or coworker. And that's 465,000 individuals not buying animals on classified sites. So this collective effort is day by day driving the public discourse to a point where politicians are increasingly compelled to take concrete actions when it comes to the sale of animals on classified sites. I would like also to add that I think this classified site use.ca, I think they're based in British Columbia, when they banned profiting from household pets across the entire network in 2015. I don't know if you remember that, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they kind of commented that this petition, the Kijiji petition, was one of their motivators behind the decision. So this petition is also helping other companies, businesses, and individuals to base their decision on. So to me, it's a success.
Thanks so much for sharing those. I think something that I end up having a hard time with in advocacy is when you have big goals, seeing all the intermediary steps as successes. It's so easy to get a feeling of sort of like, oh, but we haven't, maybe this one thing hasn't happened, but it's so good to see sort of like the process of getting there. And particularly what Barbara brought up around public attitude change, because the only way you're going to see legal change is when you have really the vast majority of the public on side.
Yeah.
So, saying that, certainly partnerships play a big role in getting the public on side. Can you speak to the partnerships you've made to advance your work for animals?
I think it's so interesting that, Barbara, that you use your town council as the muscle for change, because I used to sit on one of the City of Burnaby's sustainability committee, and it was really always interesting to me that it does make a difference. I think using those tools as a way of driving change.
But Tessa, I want to say that for the pet store, I always ask first the company. Like I went ahead and I wrote them a letter for the pet store. What are the problems? And when they said no, that's where I had to go step up somewhere else. That's why I went to see my town council for that. But I always ask communication first with the company. I did this same thing with Kijiji. Before I started the campaign, the petition, I went ahead and write to them. I wrote to them just to make sure that what was the problem. And there was no action. Then I said, well, I'm going to start a petition. I warned them in advance. I did the same thing at the town council meeting. I think I'm really believe in communication, open communication with your decision makers.
Yeah, I completely agree. Make friends, not enemies, right? I think is the key, and build partnerships as much as you possibly can. I would just add that we had hit a little bit of a roadblock. And by this point, we had actually been approached by Humane Society International, Michael Bernard, and they had already done a lot of work behind the scenes and had hit a wall. But our petition and our Facebook page and our letters, I think we managed to sort of build that grassroots kind of awareness for the issue, which they had not done because they work in a different kind of way. But I would just say that my MP, so I didn't use town council, but I had an MP knock at my door, and we ended up building a relationship, and I sort of educated him quite a bit about what was happening with elephants and the laws in Canada. And he was really amazing. And he just said, I will do what I can to galvanize some people sort of behind the scenes. And he did exactly that. One of the things that I've learned is you have to be open to talking to everybody, because as an advocate, I think you're that voice and that story needs to be told, because how else does it happen? So you'd find me anywhere talking about elephants in the most unusual situations, and you find allies, I think, unusual allies in that way.
That's so fantastic. Yeah, those partnerships are so important.
Yeah, we would never have been able to do it. The ivory ban has been implemented, by the way. It was implemented this January, but we would never have been able to do it without the help. Like, we worked very, very, very collaboratively with Humane Society International, and we had built a larger coalition with some other grassroots organizations. So Global March for Elephants and Rhinos Toronto, Heather Craig and Janine Caven, and then Patricia Sims from World Elephant Day. Like, everyone really, we all kind of worked together, including initially Jane Goodall Canada. So I would say for us as elephant addicts and a grassroots organization, you would never, ever be able to do it on our own. We could have tried it on our own, but but I think it really takes collaboration.
Absolutely. And that's so important, because everyone who's advocated for animals knows that there's so many barriers persuading decision makers to prioritize compassion for other species. So just having as many voices as possible doing that advocacy work is so, so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Barbara, could you also speak to some of your partnerships that you've made in your advocacy work?
Of course, I have, like, at the beginning, I had it was easy to get 30 animal rescue groups and shelters to sign up for the petitions, like Humane Canada, Humane Society International Canada, the BCSPCA, the Winnipeg Humane Society, all those big societies and small shelters and big shelters. But sometimes you find support in unexpected places that I found. Over the years, with the KG campaign, has been endorsed by some of the largest banks and websites and telecommunication providers in the country, because they were publishing ads on Kijiji pet sale pages. So I either directly wrote to those companies, or I had the help of my signers to write to them. And we had TD Bank, Royal Bank of Canada, Toyota Canada, Tangerine Bank, National Bank of Canada, and TELUS have all pulled their ads of Kijiji pet sale pages in support of this campaign. So yes, partnership is very important. And then when I go and I write to Kijiji, I tell Kijiji that, of course, but I also tell the government about this, and also helps. It also helps. That's not only individuals, but also big companies and animal shelters and rescue groups also that support this campaign.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough, actually. Like, you can find support in such unlikely places. Like, for example, Mike Farnworth, who is the Minister of Safety, I think, showed up to our marches and would come and support us and buy t-shirts and make donations. You have no idea who's an ally and who's that real believer in animal and wildlife justice and equity, I think. So I think that's really key, just being really open-minded, even when you feel beleaguered.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. We work with people in all sorts of industries in our work, and there's so many people across so many types of jobs that are really passionate about animals and compassion for animals. We mentioned that there are barriers in this work before. Could you both speak to some of the challenges you faced in your advocacy?
Okay, so last summer when I asked Kijiji to have a human moderation team carefully reviewing all pets ads and ensuring compliance with the posting policies before they go live because nothing was coming up. They were still selling animals. And so I said, at least could have a human moderation team. So they said they turned me down again, me and my but I didn't stop there. So I had to look for another solution. So I read and looked back at my campaign material and saw the comment from use.ca when they banned the profiting from household pets across the entire network. The comment said that websites like ours are not qualified or capable of regulating the breeding of pets. So it made me think, no one can better regulate than the government. So I saw this as a challenge, but I contacted every office of the Minister of Agriculture or relevant ministers in each province and territory in Canada to know their laws regulating dogs and cat breeders. And what I discovered that was only the provinces of Quebec and New Brunswick require licenses for dog and cat breeders.
Oh, wow.
So government permits could be the solution to regulating the sale of animals on classified sites. Like I said, I was faced with a challenge in this grassroots advocacy, but I learned that it's important to be flexible in my strategy and know what angle to take to have the best chance of success. So like I said, maybe the breeders permits is the way to go. So breeders who are issued permits from the government may not guarantee that these breeders are conscientious or ethical, but it provides more protection to buyers since these breeders have licenses and can be easily traced if a problem occurs. Moreover, it allows for the government to make these breeders responsible and to comply with a certain standard of care, to inspect them or even sanction them, all of which Kijiji and classified sites cannot do. So yes, when I was faced with a challenge, as always, don't despair, go back, look around, be flexible, and maybe you have to change your strategy for the best outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I always think of it as like water over rocks, right? Like you've got to find a way through one way or the other. Like if it's not going to be this way. And sometimes I would say, like we were dealing with Minister McKenna's office and, we weren't getting anywhere. And I think there are times when you just have to realize that it's just not going to happen in that way. So what else do you do? And in those instances, we would try and find other allies. So, Terry Beach was super helpful in finding allies and then really focusing on the change.org petition and really raising awareness. And then also, because we were a grassroots organization, when the CITES negotiations would come up, we would really look at how Canada actually sort of voted on all the different issues and report back out publicly on what that looks like. Because I think a lot of the public just doesn't understand how that world works and why would they, right? Like it's not everyone's job to do that, but there is sort of a systemic kind of way of keeping the world working in a business as usual way, and we needed to change that. So I think you just find other tactics, right, to say let's take this kind of, it's not intended to be a closed world, but it is a bit of a closed world, and make it a little bit more open and share with people what this looks like and what they can do. And so that's when we ended up using New Mode and doing a big MP letter writing campaign, because we were like, well, we can't get anywhere with the minister because they don't care or they don't have time or there's some other issues. So let's just write letters. And so we ended up getting 7,000 letters written to MPs all across the country. And so then the minister has to respond because the MPs are writing her office saying what's going on. So I think you have to just be really, really, like Barbara said, you've got to be flexible, you be open-minded, you can't be deterred. And so I appreciate what Barbara said.
I just want to say that don't be discouraged because you never know how you're going to, just take for instance, I was talking with a friend. She was talking about the podcast she was listening. Her husband was listening to. And said, I'm going to listen about this podcast. And I listened to the podcast, brought me somewhere else, brought me to about the story about credit cards having a policy cutting off adult sites. So I said, why they did it for the adult sites? Maybe they could do it also for classified sites for animals. So I did contact all those credit card companies. It didn't work out. They didn't budge. But even though it was a challenge, you always learn something. You know how to better write, you better answer, to learn more, how to write better, how to influence better, negotiate better. Every step of the way, you learn new things outside your topic. but it bring you somewhere else, and you go from there. Always jump from there. Where you never know what's going to lead you, so you have to try. Always try.
I would completely agree with what Barbara just said. You have to understand a multitude of different audiences. And so when I first started, I was like marching in the streets with, signs. And I think that's super necessary on some level, but I think not everyone is going to respond to that kind of advocacy. And you have to be willing to learn and change and develop what I would call, and I find it almost offensive, but the business case for why we should not be trading an elephant ivory. But you would have to be able to talk to people about numbers, right? And so I think when you're emotional about and you believe so passionately in something, it's hard to strip that back and say, okay, well, this is how we have to approach this. But that's your job, is to do that, right? Like you've got to be dispassionate in your passion sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tessa. It worked with me with council. When I brought the numbers, it made a change.
Yeah.
I think it's just too sad, but money drives people. So money drives those cities and businesses, and so you have to bring it to that level. The point that I'm seeing now with classified sites like Kijiji, I'm looking at all those provinces who don't have any laws regulating their own breeders, only Quebec and New Brunswick. And even there, New Brunswick requires to have an ad number, to have their license number on the ad, but they don't ask Gigi to verify it. In Quebec, breeders have to have a license, but the law doesn't say that the ad needs to have a license number on it. So it's so limited what we can do to help people and the people who buy animals on those sites. That's why I went to Kijiji and said, could you at least have a human moderator review those ads, at least to make sure that you are endorsing your own policies and the Canadian laws. And the only thing that can help us now that I see I'm approaching the Canadian government with that, it's the Animal Pedigree Act, that because it's the only law that's connected to Kijiji that I see so far. Because purebred dogs, no, not cats, the government doesn't care about purebred cats. It's only Animal Pedigree Act only takes care of dogs, doesn't care about cats. And the purebred dog has to be sold with the registration certification papers. And now it's the only thing that I can see that sometimes people sell purebred dogs on Kijiji without registration papers, which is illegal. So that's the only illegal point that I can go on with the government and say, look, there's a problem there. How do we go and solve this? So maybe they're going to end up and look at better regulate the sale of animals on classified sites. But until every provinces and territories in Canada regulate their own breeders, I know it's going to be a challenge. So I'm still going to be there, but it's a long story. But every provinces and territories have to step up and then regulate their own dogs and cat breeders.
Yeah, but you just take it one step at a time, right? I mean, the work is so enormous. And I think what you said, Amy, is really true, right? When you look at your end goal, you always have to have that end goal, but it's like step by step. How can I get that? And how can I get there?
Absolutely. Yeah. This discussion is, I think, really relevant to anyone wanting to do advocacy. I appreciate all the insights that you're both sharing. And it is absolutely step by step, and it's uncovering every little piece of what makes an issue, because there's always something, another layer, like Barbara is indicating around, okay, well, there's this federal government law, so maybe we can take that angle. These are some great lessons that you've learned. Are there any other lessons you've learned that you can share from your work?
Well, as Barbara was talking, I was just thinking about like things that helped us, which is, it is like, as you say, Amy, these are all really complex systemic issues. And how do you distill it to something that continues to engage the public and get that support? And so I think the communications piece and the storytelling piece is so essential. Like, how do you tell these stories? How do you continue to bring people along? Because I think it's a lot to ask just the general public to understand the complexities of everything, but what are ways and tools that we can use? And I know that it wasn't me, but there are people in our community who would come up with these really easy to see graphics that told the story like very quickly about what was happening to Africa's elephant population. And so that became very shareable on social media. And it's just those kinds of things that really kind of like, how do we go from just us to everyone else? And what is the best way and the most compelling way and true way to tell this story that can gain traction? So I'd say that that's also something to really think about.
I would like to add on Tessa's communication. It's very important. No matter how frustrating it can be, it can feel like you're not being listened to, it's better to partner with the people you want to change. I'm proud to have open communication with Kijiji. That communication has led to improvements like the credit card verification requirements they did at the beginning in 2014 or 15, I believe, when they invested in since we started that campaign. Official responses from the decision makers help show that they are engaged and can guide you in choosing a path forward, because you can find information on what they say, and always keep learning about your petition topic in and out and outside your topic. Without that, you wouldn't learn about new arguments to bring onto the table, or know if ending pet sales was necessary, and if Kijiji's incremental changes have solved the problems, and they haven't. So continue, never stops.
I would completely agree with everything that Barbara said, like everything. When we finally started, Terry Beach, our MP, reached out to Minister Wilkinson and basically brought all of his senior policy people to a meeting with Terry and the minister to meet with elephant addicts and Humane Society International, the coalition, to talk about the elephant issue. And it honestly was, there were some really tough questions, and the minister had to ask those questions. I totally understand that. But it was really, I think it's collaborating with like-minded people on all sides of the table. And that's how you make it happen. You have to bring people along. And to that point, there was a local a sale at an auction house of wildlife parts, including ivory and rhino horn and, all kinds of things. And people were outraged, said, you have to talk to them. And so I ended up, and this is to Barbara's point, I ended up just having this incredible conversation with the person who owned the auction house. And, I think when we both left that conversation, I would say that we both would be able to have another conversation again and be able to continue that conversation, because you can't alienate people. You have to bring them along with you as best as you can. And so I think that's really key.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. My mind keeps coming back to your water over rocks analogy, Tessa, because there's so many points where you can encounter resistance to change.
Wow.
And the more you take other routes and change public opinion and change public policy and laws, the more these resistance sectors are going to have to keep up. It's kind of like you're slowly eroding the rocks.
Oh, absolutely. And I think most people want to do the right thing. I don't think everyone knows how systemically complex it is or why, right? And so you have to build that kind of emotional, I can do something and I will do something, and keep that conversation going, and you'll win more of those people over, so that the other people who are a bit more resistant, that's how change happens, basically. It's long, but it's really, really important to keep your eye on the ball, right?
Yeah, just very slowly.
Yeah.
Bringing the practice around to this is the way things have always been done isn't a good enough reason to keep doing them that way.
100%.
You've shared so many amazing lessons and takeaways that I'm sure our listeners will be very interested to hear. Is there any final advice that you would give to people who are interested in taking those first steps into getting involved with grassroots advocacy?
Well, you learn, but you ask support from anyone, people, companies, businesses. Like Tessa said, we never know when we're going to find support from in unexpected places. I'm very technical, but create Google alerts relating to your campaign. You want to be aware, because you can't read all the news everywhere, but you get Google alerts, really helpful for me. And most importantly, never give up. I've been at this for a decade, but every minute of it has been worth it for the animals and the people who love them. I always think about, sometimes when Kiji says, no, I go to bed and I think of all the people who signed this, I'm going to back them up. I'm going to be there. I'm going to continue. So think about the people and the animals behind the petition. Never stop. Don't give up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that what has motivated me, although I've worked on ivory and not elephants in captivity, but that elephant in the Metro Toronto Convention Center changed me fundamentally as a person. And so everything I do for that poor elephant. Now I'm going to cry. Yeah. So, I think it's not work if you're passionate and you match it with your skills and you say, I'm going to do one thing every day.
Yeah.
Very true, Tessa. Very true.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was fantastic and so touching. Thank you so much for sharing both your experiences and for all your amazing work that you are doing.
Thanks for you guys. You guys are doing amazing work. Thank you.
If I can be of any help to any campaign out there, I'm glad to be there.
Yeah, Barbara, I would love to get the link to your petition because I'm happy to share it and sign it as well.
Oh, it's really easy. It's change.org/Kijiji.
I'm on it.
And we'll link to all of your work that you'd like to share in the blog post that will accompany this episode, which is going to be at vancouverhumane.ca/podcasts for anyone who would like to find it.
Thank you for the opportunity. And honestly, if you find the right thing that motivates you, it will never feel like work.
Yeah, so true.
It was so inspiring speaking with both of you. And that is all we have for today. To everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us.
And we hope that you'll be inspired by this podcast and start doing some more grassroots advocacy. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
The Informed Animal Ally is a podcast by the Vancouver Humane Society. If you found this episode helpful, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review to help us reach more supporters of animals. To support this project and other initiatives to build a kinder world for animals, you can make a donation at vancouverhumane.ca. You can also follow the Vancouver Humane Society on Facebook at Vancouver Humane Society, Instagram at Vancouver Humane, or Twitter at VanHumane. The music in this episode is the song Jonah's Message for New York by Dr. Turtle, licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International Public License. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being an animal ally.